ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're gonna crack on. If you can grab a chair, we're gonna enter the metaverse. I can't wait. Right, thank you very much indeed. I hope you had a good break. The next session asks the question, where is the metaverse taking us and what can it actually do? I don't know about you, but there are some questions in my head that go before that one, like metaverse, is that some kind of avant-garde poetry? I suspect it's not. Before I introduce our panel, I thought it would be good to see, you know, where the room is on the metaverse and the virtual world. And we're gonna have another one of my favourite polls. In fact, 3 polls. So please get your phones out, get onto the polls and Q&A bit. So the first question is, do you use virtual CAD models, computer-aided design, I believe? 100% yes so far. I know it's gone down. So that's one question. Another on there is, do you use virtual reality in any context? And the third question is, do you use the metaverse in any context in your business? Yes, no, don't even know what it is. So opportunities for us to look at how you are dealing with all of those. Are they all open? I don't know whether, I can see the first one is, maybe we have to do them one by one. All right, we'll do it one by one. So we've had 72 people answer the question, do you use virtual CAD models? And sort of 6-4, isn't it? 59-41 do. Right, do you use the metaverse in any context in your business? While you're answering that one, I will introduce our panel. I think that's the way we'll do this. So Tom Alexander is a director at the architectural and design company Aukett Swanke. Emma Mansfield is head of partnerships at Decentraland, which is a virtual world for digital assets. That's what it says on your website anyway. And Gwendall Esnault is the founder and CEO of Metahood, which describes itself as a metaverse real estate portal. How are we doing on this? Do you use virtual reality? Really split there, 50-50 use virtual reality in any context. Okay, let's go and see those people who use it in the business. We know that half of the room don't. So let's go on to the final of those questions now. It's still playing with that. We'll come back, find out how many people use it in a business context in a second. Okay, I think we need to start at the beginning. I suppose I've got a vague notion of virtual worlds through sort of gaming. I had an avatar in Second Life for a while. Remember when it first came out, it was everyone had to have an avatar. I suspect my avatar is still there, wandering around in a lonely way. I enjoyed SimCity. I can certainly see how computer graphics can help in design, how virtual reality can help people see spaces before they actually exist in real life. I can see lots of advantages for sector in that. But I thought we'll start the conversation with Tom, because you're not a metaverse person, you're an architect, but you are a sort of newcomer to the possible uses of the virtual world in your business. Perhaps you could just sort of take us through your journey as to how you got to where you are today.
Yep, thank you. If I can get the slides up, I'm going to do a sort of quick journey really from the beginning, as it were. Pencil to metaverse is what I call it. So perspectives, we understand they were done in ancient Roman and Greek times, but they are recorded visibly in the sort of 15th century. So this is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, the Adoration of the Magi, and he was using a single point perspective. So you can, what's good about this drawing is he's using lines, you can see how he's constructing it. He's creating a space, a three-dimensional space, in which to put people in a painting. And that was a three-dimensional immersion, which must have been quite stunning when people started to see it.
Before that, the very flat pictures we could remember from sort of medieval art and so on, and then this was a real sort of breakthrough in the way the Renaissance...
Exactly. I mean, you can see it in the National Portrait Gallery, or the National Gallery, so you can see there are certain paintings where perspective starts to come into it, and it's quite striking, and often wrong. But this is, you know, Leonardo was a bit of a genius, so he did it. But just leaping forward, if that works, to the next slide, that is a single point perspective done in the 21st century with a pen. and then a bit of Photoshop. So it's the point being that you can create a view, a vision, a bit of an architectural idea of something. This is very sketchy. But you can do it, and it's been we haven't changed that much in the ability to create those spaces with a pencil or a pen, which is great. I think that's a good thing. We can do things quickly. The pencil and the pen can be used in many different ways. A simple sketch, working out the proportions, the facade of a building, something a little bit more elaborate in terms of a big idea with some words and some images. That's an urban lounge on the top right. A diagram which illustrates the environmental strategies for a building design. That happens to be the Open University. And then whole little neighborhoods, if you like, to cities. You can imagine yourself floating above a scene and creating a vision of what something could look like. That's the business park of the future that we came up with. But models as well, physical things are really important to the way that we design, and still are, and certainly in the residential industry, using lights inside them to light up the apartment, and you press a button around the edge. That's the one I want, please. And also little mock-ups and things. But then we hit the CAD age, which was extraordinary for architects and designers all over the place. You could suddenly create three-dimensional models in CAD. It started off 2D, but went three-dimensional pretty quickly, which was phenomenal. You had the ink pen went to the side, and we could do all these amazing views. You could blow buildings up and analyze them bit by bit.
Did it change the way you design buildings? Well, that was change your thinking about what a building looks like?
Perfect question, because a lot of people started designing buildings through the modeling experience, and they started looking like sort of CAD buildings. Perhaps slightly less human, but people got pretty clever. It's a tool. We realized quite quickly that pencil is a tool, so is CAD. So you can cut through buildings. You can start to do pretty perfect photorealistic images, which, again, so you can start to show people what the building will look like, years before it's even going to be built. This is actually looks just like that, I must say. Now it's built. But we really use all of those tools now. We use sketching, we use diagrams, we use models, we use CAD, we even use reference photographs, and gradually we get to the real building through mock-ups as well. So it's a three-dimensional, illustrative, and often immersive process that we use.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? People always think that new technology is going to kill the old technology, but actually, cinema didn't kill books and television didn't kill cinema, and in a way, it's the same, that actually a pencil still has an important part to play. It's not the end of pencils, but it's another tool.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's across sort of different sort of typology sectors as well as in the arts. And that's powerful. Somebody once asked me to draw a circle in a meeting, and if I hadn't been able to do it, I think they wouldn't have hired me. But fortunately, I could, because I've been doing it for years. The next one is moments in time. So we're moving a little bit forward. The kind of level of detail you can put into a single view is astounding, and you can show this happens to be the transformation of an industrial building into a live-work space. So it's got some resi in there, it's got some working space, but it still has remnants of industrial activity possible. But it's an illustration that grabs people's idea. This is actually here east in Stratford. Another moment in time, really powerful, single unmoving image, which you can use to sort of suggest to people what it's going to feel like, where the sun is, for example. The next one, so then we got into animation, and things started to get really, really interesting. So you build the model, and hopefully this is going to start moving. There we go. Yeah. So animation can be curated, and this is an example of a curated one. So we take you on a journey that we've prescribed through a building. This happens to be a mixture of actually schools, residential, and office, all in one kind of biosphere, if you like. But we were able to take people on a journey, it was quite a complex building. It starts off very slowly. You can, during this point, just stop and freeze and look around and see what's going on.
You can change your point of view, yeah.
More like you have a choice. So you might take somebody into the model. I'm not doing it here today, but you might take them into the model and stop and say, where would you like to look at next? The curated version is a bit easier for architects, because then we don't have to detail and model absolutely everything.
I want to go in there. No, don't think you want to go in there.
That room's not kitted out yet, exactly. This does get really fast, actually, and I sort of, there are points where you can do 360 animations, so you can sort of stand in there and literally do a globe all the way around, which is another choice. You then get into virtual reality, where you start putting on a headset, and this is still the same animation, but it's illustrating how it might be if you had a headset looking through our building. So it goes really fast, you can look up and down, you can see what's going on, lots of very sustainable materials there. which is quite interesting. And then the augmented reality, the next step, which is, as I understand it, where you might be walking down the street with some special glasses. Google tried it, but there are many others, and many people looking at that. So you might start to see, you see it sometimes in those TV programs about somebody wants the room designed, and they just put these headphones, this eyeglasses on, and they can start to look around two designers' ideas for one empty space. So this is going to run on for a little bit longer, but essentially I just thought it might be worth to give you a tiny bit of history, very truncated, before the real expert.
What is the sort of time scale we're looking at? So when would you first have started playing around with CAD, for instance?
80s and 90s, late 80s.
And this stuff is much more recent,
So this is like last year.
Right.
This is kind of, you know, and a student will do this. Literally somebody who's trained in college using the technology, gaming more than likely, but certainly with design, that they will come together and work with our teams who are a little more established, and we'll talk design and detail, and they'll model this. We'll choose the routes with them and the materials.
It's very beautiful. I sort of instinctively understand how the technology works, but we're going to move on now to the idea of metaverse. Gwendall, help me. I get this, but I still don't have an idea in my head of what the metaverse is, or actually how it might be useful to me.
That's a very interesting question, and actually a bit
Good.
quite a tricky one, honestly. First, really happy to be here. Hello, everyone. But yeah, everybody has their own definitions of the metaverse today. The popular definition of the metaverse is this 3D, immersive, persistent environment where you browse through an avatar in a 3D space, sort of what you would do in a video game. That's the popular one, right? The Ready Player One definition. But more and more, from what's being built in the metaverse space, and especially in the Web3 space, in the blockchain-related metaverse space, it's this idea of having your physical life and digital lives bound somehow, through not only the social aspect we have today, but also through an economic aspect. So
okay, so my real life and my virtual life. I don't have a virtual life, but you do. You have an avatar that looks a bit like you. Got a beard.
Do you have an Instagram account?
I don't know.
Okay, maybe yours are wrong example, but so my point is a lot of people who are in these social networks today are already in sort of a metaverse, right? And whether you consider having an interface like it would be on Instagram or Twitter, or having a 3D environment, the idea would be that if you have an avatar, an extension of yourself that expresses itself online, it's sort of a metaverse, right? So today it's already a metaverse we have through Instagram and Twitter. Today, when everybody will be in with VR headset, we'll have these more immersive metaverses. And
so, I mean, seriously, I mean, the VR sets, it's a big thing to put on, isn't it?
Yeah.
And suddenly you're not in the real world. You can be, obviously the degree to which you're immersed, I suppose, can change. But are you really imagining a world in which, perhaps a room like this, everyone would be wearing a headset and we're kind of in another place at the same time?
Yeah, not necessarily a VR headset, but you can think of AR headsets, augmented reality. So it already exists, right? You have the technology is there, you have constructors who do it, but it's not popular yet. But the idea is tomorrow you will be, let's imagine in a year Apple launches Google Glasses, Apple Glasses, and it's a beautiful product that like they used to do, and it becomes trendy. Everybody will be working around with this, and it will just enable you to have data on top of real world, right? So you will be able to look at the room, for example, and have data on, I don't know, the room temperature, the name of this person here, I don't know. You can
that would be jolly helpful for me. I'm hopeful. You described yourself as a metaverse real estate portal. So for the people in this room, who perhaps will come to you, enter your virtual space. Mm-hmm. These are business people who are trying to do a very specific real world job. What kind of things could they do in your world that they can't do in the real world?
So right now what we cover with Metahood are the metaverse real estate assets. So it's this idea of having virtual worlds like Decentraland, where you can own a piece.
We'll come on to Decentraland in a moment.
Yes. But we work with Decentraland.
Yeah.
So we allow people to buy and sell parcels of lands in these virtual worlds.
So these are buying and selling parcels of land. Does does this land actually exist?
It's digital.
It's digital.
It's a
It doesn't
virtual world,
exist.
exactly.
Does it have a real value?
I mean, it has a value that people agree it has, right? It's like all assets. People agree there is a demand on these assets, and the market defines the price. And right now, that's the price. That's all assets are defined.
I think we need to discuss Decentraland now. Emma, you have an avatar as well, a changing avatar in Decentraland, and I know you have a space in Decentraland. You obviously have a link. I'm the only one here who's never been. But tell me, what is it, and what value could it have for the people in this room?
Sure. So Decentraland is a virtual world. It's often described as a sort of a 3D sort of social platform. So the same way that you interact with social platforms now, it's more immersive. So you feel like you're within the content rather than simply viewing the content. It's open source, which essentially means that anyone can use our code and build and create experiences within it. So hence the decentralized name. It's a platform that is governed and built by the community. So it's not owned by a corporation. It's a very interesting social experiment, which has a decentralized autonomous organization behind it.
And I really like the idea of testing, as it were, real-world governance in a virtual setting. I think that's really interesting. But I just want to go back to this. I'm sorry. I'm sure I'm being very old fogey-ish here, but I still don't quite get why I would need to be in. What advantage is there for me as let's say a housing professional in being in Decentraland?
I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples. So. Different sectors, I think, have been quick to get into this space. So art is one, and primarily that happened because of the creation of NFTs and people wanting
NFTs, for those who don't, non-fungible tokens. So this is, well, perhaps you explain what they are.
So essentially, people wanting a space to display their digital art. So
digital art that doesn't exist in the real world.
Exactly. So galleries, auction houses, etc., are quick to sort of set up in this space. One of the examples would be Sotheby's. So Sotheby's wanted to have a location, a building, their gallery, their auction house within Decentraland, and they created.
They've got one in Bond Street, haven't they?
Exactly. They wanted an exact replica, so a one-by-one replica of their store. So if you are, as your avatar walking around Decentraland, you will see the Sotheby's facade, you will see the doorman, you will walk in. If you've got experience of being in their building, you will recognize it. The layout's exactly the same. And that's, and you
can see the works of art, whether they're digital or real, presumably.
Correct, yeah.
And then can you buy one? Can you ask about them?
You can navigate, you can see the art, you can get more information about the artist, and you can navigate to purchase.
Okay. So I can see we take that model into the housing sector. Somebody's putting up a new residential block, say, in the real world. They produce another version in Decentraland, and presumably I, as a potential buyer in the real world, could go and have a really good look round.
Yeah, you could use it as a sort of an education tool, inspiration. What you can create, in the metaverse can be fantastical. You're not governed or bound by licensing or permits or the things that sort of limit you in the physical world. You could create, as I said, a exact replica of a building or location or residential area in the real world, but you could also do something completely fantastical. You could design it as a spaceship or whatever you wanted to do.
Okay, so I sort of see we can sort of give people an experience of something they might not be able to get to in the real world through your virtual portal. Is space within the virtual world also being bought and sold and construction? So, if Sotheby's want to have their HQ, they want to have it on the right street in Decentraland. So presumably there is a value to where they fit within the virtual world.
Definitely, people will consider the location in the same way they would in the physical world. So what you're adjacent to. Landowners can lease their land. So you don't need the capital investment necessarily to buy land in Decentraland. You can rent land from existing owners. And it's interesting that in the same way that you would, we're in London, so use a London example. So somewhere like Coles Drops Yard, where there's a mixture of residential and commercial. They have been very conscious of placemaking, thinking about the restaurants, the stores, the communities that they want to build in that location. And it is exactly the same thing in a virtual world. You want to attract the right businesses, organizations, communities into your space. And the idea is that your virtual land will appreciate and value in the same way it would in the physical world.
Right. So, Tom, you have an avatar in Decentraland. Does it look like you?
Not exactly, no. It's got a goatee and lots of hair.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't find it. Anyway, no, I do.
So what has drawn you to Decentraland?
Mainly this panel, actually, because I went
Okay, all right.
looked it up, and I sort of dabbled a bit, I suppose, and I was aware of...
Can you see sort of real-world applications? I mean, I can see it's fun. There's and gaming obviously has been one of the big drivers in all of this. But hard-headed business people thinking, do I want to spend a lot of energy in that space? What would you say?
I mean, I think slightly naively, but I think there's an opportunity for digital twins for sure.
Yeah.
So you have a real life property and one in Decentraland where people from all over the world could go and visit a property that perhaps we've built the model for that goes into it, and they can go and walk around and experience it. The actual purchasing within Decentraland rather than the real one is where it kind of gets interesting and unusual. So, I mean, as I walked around it, I certainly, very quickly, I get the feel for why you'd be here and what you might do here, and it starts to open up, and it's not a closed world, it's a land of opportunity. No planning.
Maybe there's some advantage. But, is there no planning? Because presumably Decentraland, I mean, it's decentralized. There's no king, no prime minister. So can I just build anything I want anywhere?
It's essentially open source, so you need land to be able to deploy a building. But yes, the idea is that Web3 modelers, designers, developers, anywhere in the world can create and build within Decentraland. There are, as I said, there's this DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, that governs, and they make decisions about the roadmap and the development and moderation. But in the context of creating a building, whether that's residential or commercial, then yeah, anyone can come into this space and create experiences.
I mean, that's a sort of, it could be quite chaotic in that sense. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter, but, people feel very strongly about the architecture of a neighborhood, that things are in keeping with the history of that space. And I suppose if you've just got, anyone can come along. I don't know how you buy land. Presumably you have to pay for it and then off you go. Well, how do you do it? You tell me, Gwendall. That process. Let's imagine I'm sold on all of this, and I've decided, right, I'm going to build a beautiful residential mansion block in Decentraland. How does that process work?
So in this platform, usually first you need to purchase the land or to control it, be able to control it. So you either buy it or rent it. Today you start to have rental mechanisms that allow you, without owning the good, to...
When we're saying land, I mean, this is it's not real. It's in this sort of space. Mm-hmm. But I'm buying what then? I mean, this is where it gets...
So usually it's done through non-fungible tokens that you mentioned.
Right, NFTs.
So it's a digital right over a digital asset, right? So these tokens stipulate basically that you own something. So in this case, it's a parcel of land in this virtual world, right?
Right.
And when you own it, you can do whatever you want with it, depending on the rules and
So there are rules.
And the terms and conditions of the platforms, of course. But you can, in this case, bring assets. So it's different from real life in the sense that you don't need to bring construction workers and you don't need the whole logistic. You can just bring a 3D model that you drop in this space, virtual space, and you get your building. You can the same way use an avatar.
And people can make money out of this?
That's another question. In theory, yes. Yeah,
that might be a big question for some of the people in this room, but
practically you need usage, right? It's like in any business, you need people and usage and flows of money.
So we've had a question flood in. If you've got any more questions, I'm sure you've probably got some. Do go either onto the swap card thing or throw your hand in the air and I'll find you. But the question is, how does copyright work at Decentraland, e.g. who owns Bond Street, which would protect the Sotheby's brand?
As a decentralized organization, you know, the owners are the IP holders, the rights. So we're simply the platform. I myself work for a foundation which is non-profit. So the IP owners regain the rights of all of their property.
And have you had to adjust in the time that Decentraland's been in existence? Presumably, I mean, you're learning as you go along, like everybody. I mean, have you said, actually, we need to just have a bit more control here, or has it worked exactly as you'd imagined?
Well, I've only joined 6 months ago, so
right.
I couldn't.
So I'm not blaming you, Emma.
It's only 4 years. It's only 4 years old, and actually, you know, it's such a new space. But yeah, you know, we've been launched 2 years, so we're testing and learning in real time. There's other metaverses that are in beta or haven't launched yet, so I think we've got the slight advantage of sort of understanding sort of...
how many of them are there now? There's obviously yourselves. Are there lots?
There's hundreds. Yeah.
Hundreds?
Well, maybe not hundreds, but yeah, many.
Scores. Okay, so I've got a question here, again from Anonymous. Is there a risk that a large amount of virtual worlds leads to wild value fluctuations in each world as companies take space at the next flavour of the month? Is that something that we're likely to see, is that, you know, Decentraland is very popular now, suddenly we oh no, that's yesterday, we need to be in some new land over there?
In a sense, it may happen. It's really similar, I think, to what we can see with social networks today. You have network effects, yes. Right? So a metaverse will become popular when many people are in there, or there is many content in there. And content mainly comes through the fact that there is people, right? People build in anywhere because they expect people will be there and they will be able to make money, or at least get visibility on what they built. So you have network effects, and you will have great, you know, more and more network effects as more people come. So it will be really hard from, you know, one metaverse with a lot of users and everybody having their own identity and friends and you know, community there to move to another. But that's also an interesting aspect of the metaverse. You have the possibility of interoperable assets. So that's the whole point of actually what we call the open metaverse, based on NFTs, is the idea that what you own in a metaverse is not limited to this metaverse, right? So you can move it around. Let's say you purchase an expensive building, you can use it in Decentraland, but if you want to test it in another metaverse for any reason, you can just move it around. So
will I be able to move from one world to the other without, sort of, as it were, coming out and going back in again? Could it be that these become almost like different nations on a planet? You actually sort of move around. I don't know, maybe.
That's the hope, that's how it develops. At the moment, sort of interoperability is really between the physical world and the digital world. Yeah. But you know, there's new developments all the time, and that's the vision of Web3, that you own you own your data, you own your digital assets, and that you can choose where to locate them.
I want to talk about digital twins, because I mean that was a really interesting phenomenon that I think to some extent was driven by the pandemic, actually, and people not being able to go and do viewings and so on. But do you use digital twins in your work?
In theory, yes. The whole BIM process is you build a model of the building and you're designing it, and you hand it over once the building's finished. And it's used to monitor the building's performance and find out
exactly. That's what I was interested in, because it's sort of one thing, isn't it, to be able to say, well, do you want to buy this flat, and you can walk in and I can sort of get that. But what we saw during the pandemic was people using digital twins to do all kinds of tasks. They could see for stresses and strains in the building's infrastructure. They could see where windows being left open unnecessarily. Where was the energy seeping from? Who was in what part of the building? What do we need to repair? Is that part of the vision, that actually the virtual world will allow you to see your building in, you know, as it were, almost sort of on the inside out?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah, is your question about?
Yeah, so digital twins presumably is part of what you do, but it's more than just, you know, Sotheby's. You can walk in and look around. It's actually, you know, we need to understand the fire safety of this building, and we've got a digital twin in Decentraland or whichever land it's in, and we can actually send experts into our digital twin, and we can see actually there's a real problem there.
Exactly, yeah. I think a lot of industries will benefit from it. Why would you fly 10 hours to go to the other side of the world if you can just put a headset and be in an experience that's similar to you being in real life there, right? And the more the technology will progress, the less distinct it will be from reality, right? When you will wear a headset, you will have the feeling to be there, and the proportion will be similar. So in the example you mentioned, it makes total sense. You already have this kind of experiences today in the...
That does seem to me to have a real practical element. I can see how that could develop over time as well. Emma, the question for you, I think, from Harriet Clark. Harriet, are you in the room? Not everyone. Oh, hello. Thank you for your question. What would be the impact for residents of the future using the metaverse throughout their applicant and resident journeys? So that's interesting. It's sort of, I mean, obviously, people want to buy a house, they might be able to go and look at the virtual version, but maybe beyond that.
I think it is early days, and I think a lot of the use cases are so far a lot more sort of like commercial, so stores, art galleries, you know, games, etc. But I think that will develop, and people wanting to have their own sort of personal space within the metaverse. You don't necessarily need you know, bedrooms or toilets in the same way you would in a physical space, but having like penthouses where there's kind of more of a sort of lifestyle focus, I think is really interesting, and having your own space to socialize in that isn't, you know, that isn't a high street sort of location, I think will develop and will become more.
I mean, one of the things, I mean, lockdown was a real a learning space, I think, for a lot of this kind of thinking. What we missed, certainly not being able to hold conferences like this, was not the sort of formal stuff that you could do on Teams or Zoom, but actually it was the serendipity. It was bumping into somebody outside and having that chat and an idea coming. And can that work in the metaverse? Can your avatar literally just bump into another one and you actually have those, you know, those sort of special little moments?
Yeah. Most definitely, you know.
Does your avatar do that?
People arrange meetups, they host events, you know, there's events companies that specialize in metaverse events, and that's a way for people to meet up, socialize around a passion point. So most definitely you could attend an event and know that your community and your peers are going to be at that event, or you can meet, bump into someone, as you say.
And you can, I mean, so those kind of, you know, sort of unexpected conversations, which are often, I don't know, it's my feeling anyway, is often those are the most creative, actually, because they're not sort of pre-planned. Actually, there's a great question here. It's dropped off, but it said, "Could Vladimir Putin invade Decentraland?" And I'm just desperate to know. I mean, could you have? I mean, can hackers and those kind of things come in and just create mayhem?
I really don't like that question.
Oh well, that's fine. That's fine. Let's not go there. We've got some quite good questions. In theory, space is unlimited, which of course is the opposite of the physical space. How do you drive value in this situation? Maybe that's one for you.
So it's true, in theory you can create as many land as you want because it's digital and there is no limit, but in the practical aspect, these worlds try to create incentives for people to build experiences on top of their lands. So bringing scarcity to the, you know, these worlds and the number of lands available allow the market to decide on the value, you know, because it's scarce, people want to buy it, and want to buy it to create experiences. And actually the fact that it's not bound by the laws of physics, like in the physical world, also enables it to get, at term, will enable it to get much greater value than the physical real estate, because in physical real estate you're limited to the, you know, the laws of physics. You cannot put more than 10 people in a room. In this one, I don't know how many people you can put, but in virtual environments, you can virtually put as many people as you want, you know. So you will have places where you will have a lot of activity. It will be probably millions of people in this single area, and if you own it, it will probably have, you know, you will be happy. But
I joked earlier about my Second Life avatar wandering around lonely. I am interested, though, in whether or not these worlds can sort of exist almost without us having to directly be in them in real time. In other words, things can happen in the metaverse and you have to go and sort of catch up and see, how did that meeting go? How's that building going? Is that where we could be heading? So it will actually exist with its own, in its own time and space.
Yeah, but I think also, you know, these are global communities. Yeah. So, you know, just because we're sleeping and we're not in this virtual space, then, you know, all over the world, people are engaging in different times. So,
I see. So you wake up in the morning and discover you've got a new neighbour who just happened to have been online when you were fast asleep.
Could well be, yeah.
Yeah.
It's developing super quickly, so why not?
I mean, yes, there was a question there which has now disappeared. I'll see if I can. Well, this is a good one. Is there a danger of misrepresentation with virtual buildings? What parameters would you put in place to keep a sense of reality and manage expectations? I mean, that Gwendall, that's, you know, people in this room, you have to have everything, you have plans and everything nailed down. There is a worry that perhaps in the virtual world, things might be a little bit looser, they won't have the same kind of controls, and that could be problematic for people in the property sector.
Control, you mean? Yes, it will really depend on the platforms, and you know, all the different platforms try to set different tools for people to moderate what is happening in their pieces of land. So it will be really, you know, on a case-by-case matter. You know, it will really depend on the platforms, but it's really something that indeed has to be taken care of.
I would just add to that and just say there's an amazing ecosystem that exists around these different metaverses, you know, all sort of Web3 studios, developers, 3D modelers that are, you know, creating amazing buildings, you know, and they're the teams you need once you've bought your land, if, you know, whatever you want to create. And, you know, the teams and the talent behind it is incredible. So being able to take replicas and do digital twins, be able to, you know, create amazing experiences, building residential, you know, there's, you know, teams all over the world that are now taking briefs and building and creating this in Decentraland, but many other metaverses.
The question on here, the latest question, it's got one like, actually, so we'll definitely ask that. What's the population of Decentraland?
It fluctuates. I think at our largest, we were up to 600,000 monthly active users.
600,000? Wow. It's quite busy, quite crowded in there at times, perhaps.
It demonstrates, you know, there's communities. So, you know, and that does fluctuate. You know, we're in what is regarded as a bear market now in crypto. So you do see some fluctuations in terms of, you know, the NFT space and purchases and things like that. But yeah, it's, you know, engagement is there.
Which one were you pointing at?
There's a question at the top I was quite interested in.
In theory, space is unlimited, which of course is the opposite of the physical space. How do you drive value in the situation?
It just caught my mind.
There's a question here actually, which is not quite the same. It's about, are you able to create the equivalent of a TARDIS in the metaverse? Do you only need a doorway? It's not quite the same, but I mean, it sort of gets us into an interesting, could you have a TARDIS? Could you just have a doorway and then actually go beyond into something much bigger than the sort of space of that you'd expect? You can, you're nodding.
Yeah,
you don't know.
That's
so exciting. Space-time continuum is.
Oh yeah, that's a beauty.
On this thing about value, if you've got unlimited space, I mean, obviously everyone in this room knows land and the price of land is so critical, but actually if you have it unlimited, I mean, that does open up opportunities.
I think so. I mean, the TARDIS thing, it's like a TARDIS anyway. You go on screen and it just opens up into another world.
Yeah.
But that one there, people started trading at a crossroads of two roads in the countryside, and they would meet on that crossroads, and they'd bring goods to sell to each other, and then somebody built a pub and somebody built a house, and then that's how cities grew.
Yeah.
And that city became, the space in the middle of it became more valuable in the middle gradually, and at the edges less so. And then in my experience of the virtual worlds, it's similar, because you don't want to be buying a bit of land or operating away from where the action is.
Yes.
And the action shifts around and is very three-dimensional, and finding it is an interesting journey. I've tried. I went to an empty nightclub. There was no one in there. But I've also looked at buildings where there's quite a few people and avatars all around, and I was constantly bumping into people. So there's a sense.
Would you have a conversation? I mean, you sort of.
I didn't quite do that, but it was there.
Can.
It's like Facebook or something. Or Twitter. Yeah. Somebody's saying something, and you can engage with them. It looks a bit different.
I'm wondering about the process of design, though, because you know, as that question illustrates in a way, at the moment, the way that architects think, even using CAD and animations and all that, you still are sort of fixed by the spaces, by physics, I suppose. Maybe it could be quite an interesting creative exercise when you're kind of liberated from the realities of physics and can start thinking about space in a different way. How that then translates into the real world, I'm not sure, but interesting nonetheless.
No, definitely. I mean, I think Lawrence this morning was talking about experience and things.
Yes.
And the experience in the virtual world is that, really, and things are the buildings that we actually shape and the homes we actually live in. So there is a kind of parallel or a sort of digital twinning of your both experience and things in this whole process that's, I think it's not properly fully explored yet. I think.
How high can you build? That's a good question.
There are
height
limitations.
restrictions, are there?
There are, yeah. You would need to obviously
Who decides? Is there
Luckily, not me.
not a king.
developer.
We don't have a king deciding, or a prime minister, or even a housing secretary.
I know we're on time, so I guess I would say, like, I think one of the benefits of Decentraland and other metaverses is the ease at which you can join. So you can enter with a crypto wallet, or you can just do a simple avatar development sign up, and you're in within a minute.
Is it all cryptocurrency based, or can you pay?
You don't need to have any knowledge of crypto to enter the space. You can do it on a web browser, so you can be in world within a minute and explore. So I would encourage everyone here to, if they're slightly interested, to go and have a look.
And Gwendall, last question to you. Is this good for humanity?
In a sense, yes. The more digital good you consume, the less physical ones you consume, and it's better for the environment, I think, in a sense. But it will have to be controlled, right? If everybody lives with VR headsets, you end up in a dystopic world, Matrix style, and we don't want that. So we'll have to make sure it doesn't happen.
Challenges ahead. Well, if you want to know more about the Metaverse, you're hosting one of the roundtables at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you want to be on that one, remember it's all about power, mass and speed to get to the right table at the right time. But for the moment, to Tom and Emma and to Gwendall, thank you very much indeed for introducing me to the Metaverse.